Hello and welcome back for another VMK in the game development series. In this VMK we're going to start wrapping things up with our GUI navigation menus by cleaning up the last remaining two screens that we've left out. This will be the game state paused and game state pause options. Let's go into Paint Shop Pro here and take a look. We finished off game state starting. This is our splash screen. We have the main menu that starts up whenever the application starts. From here we can go into an options menu to tweak some settings before we start playing the game. We've already covered how to do the loading inside game state loading, and then once this guy's done he'll automatically put us inside of game state play. What we're going to do in this video is clean up these two remaining game states, which are pause and pause options. We're going to be able to go into the pause menu if we lose focus while we're in the play state, or if we press the escape key. We're going to automatically go inside of this pause, and from here we'll have a couple of options. We'll be able to return back to the game, we'll be able to exit the game back to the main menu, and we'll also be able to go in and tweak some options. If we go into the options, we'll be able to change some, similar to the ones that we have in here, but there will be a few that are missing, and I'll talk about the missing ones coming up. And then from here we can go back into the pause state as well. So that's what we're heading towards in this VMK. Let's jump right into our code by going into our project under the game engine, game OpenGL, and we want to go and open up the frame function. Our frame is responsible for keeping control of what is going to be shown on the screen every time we go through our loop. And we already see here that we've set it up so that if we are inside game state pause or pause options, we're going to call show menu. And if we lose focus, we'll be calling this function here, Windows focus lost. We can see that if the game state now is equal to play, then we're going to change the state to be equal to pause. Now, because we're not rendering anything under pause, we should just see blackness on the screen. Well, let's go and try it out, see what happens. If we start our game up after it does all the loading, we still have our model from the previous VMK. Now let's lose our focus just by tabbing over to a different application. So here we are back inside of our code. Now if we were to return back to our game, we see that it automatically jumps us back into our program. Let's see if that's exactly what we're to expect. If we go in underneath Windows Focus Receive, we see, it has been programmed so that if it is inside pause, it will automatically go back to play whenever we receive focus. Let's just comment this out so that we don't return back to our play state, just to see exactly what's going to happen. So here we go. We're going to load the screen for our models, and then once we start up, we're going to lose focus again and take a look. Okay, so we've lost focus in our window. Now if we return back, you notice that our cursor is getting rendered to the screen, but we basically have blackness everywhere, and we have nothing to click on, or there's no options. The reason for this is because we're inside of the pause state, but we haven't associated any GUI items to be rendered on this screen. And we don't have any buttons right now to click to return us back to the main menu or go back into the main game. So we need to incorporate that. To add some GUI elements to our pause state, we need to go inside of our scene lib, underneath scene, and inside of the initialize function. Here, this is where we're setting up all the different graphical user interfaces for every single screen. And if I scroll down to the very bottom, we're going to add the ones for our pause and pause options. Underneath the pause menu, we're going to have a few buttons. There'll be one button here that will allow us to exit out of the game and return us back into the main menu. So there's this button here. Then we have a continue button, which allows us to return back to our game and continue playing it. So that's this button here. And then we have a options button, which we can press to go inside of the pause options game state. And that's this button here. then inside of the pause options menu, we're going to have a bunch of controls and a bunch of options. So it's going to look very similar to the regular options menu, but we will have removed a few options. So here we just have a image that says pause options, and then we have a text field for our viewing depth, because we'll have the viewing depth slider. We have our leaves showing up as well. Here's some text that we can show which side of the slider is near and which side is far. Then we have our slider. Then the other options that we have in here are going to be listed underneath pause options controls. And here we can specify that we're going to allow the user to change the inversion of the mouse. So here's invert mouse Y. That's the text that's going to show up. And then we'll have a leaf and a button that we can use to select whether the mouse is inverted or not. So those are the 4 states that we have for the checkbox. And then finally, we're going to indicate which of those states we want to initialize using the puser settings value that's already in there. Let's see what else we have here. We have mouse sensitivity. We can change that during gameplay. So we have mouse sensitivity text label. Then we have a leaf showing up. And then after that, we have some text labels here for low as well as high sensitivity, so we know which side of the slider is low and which side is high. And then we have our slider itself, which is used to control what value the user wants. We also need one button to allow us to return out of the pause options back to the pause game state. So that's this button right here, and that's the last control that we're going to worry about. So let's just go and build this and make sure that visually the pause option is showing up on the screen now. So let's start the game, wait for this to load. Actually, I should comment that out so that we don't have to wait here a couple seconds every time I go and do this. Now, to go into the pause state, we need to lose focus because I haven't implemented the escape key yet. I'm just going to navigate over here inside of our code and then return back to our game. Notice now we have our buttons. We have continue, options, and exit to main. Now, if I click on any of these, once again, they don't do anything right now because we haven't written the code yet to transition us from our pause state back to play, or to the options menu, or back to the main menu. So we need to implement that. But at least our game state pause screen is showing up on the screen, which is really good. Well, let's quit out of this and make a few modifications. Underneath our load level data, I think it's called, right here. This is where we are initializing everything that's going to show up on inside of our game. I'm going to comment this load Caligari file so that we're not waiting for the 3D model to load into memory, which will speed up the running of our program. So all we're going to have is just a flat grid on our screen. Now, I want to incorporate the escape key so that we can press the escape key and automatically go inside of our pause game state. To do that, we need to go back inside game OpenGL, and what we're going to need to do is go inside of the function that's called message handler. In here, this is where we receive all the different messages based on key presses or different states inside of Windows. Because the escape key is going to be a keyboard press action, we need to go down here under key down and add an extra if statement here to handle the case when we press the escape key. So here it is here. We're going to check to see if wparam is equal to VK underscore escape and the game state is equal to play. So the escape key will only become active when we're inside of the play state. If this is the case, then we're going to change our game state to be equal to game state pause. And then that will force us to go into our pause menu, which will then render on the screen. So let's go and compile this, build it, and give it a try. So here we go, we start the game. All we have is a regular grid on the ground for us to see. Now if I press the escape key, notice that we automatically went into our pause state. And again, we still haven't implemented any functionality here, so we can't have these buttons working just yet. Let's go implement that now. For the GUI to respond to your actions, you need to handle them inside of our function inside of scene. And the function that we wrote was located right here, GUI check hotspots. And you'll remember that we split it up based on GUI type. So if the type is a button, then we have a switch statement here that specifies which specific button we're pressing. And then based on that button being pressed, we do whatever needs to get done. So just down here at the very bottom, let's add in some new cases. If we have the pause button continue pressed, then we want to continue playing the game, so we're going to change the game state to be game state play, and then we also have to make sure that the button is no longer pressed and that the overstate is turned off. So we change up both of these to false. If the options button is pressed inside of the pause menu, then we want to change the state to be game state pause options, and then again we reset the value of the button. If the exit button is pressed, then we want to return to the main menu. Now when we do this, we need to clean up anything that we've loaded in whenever we went through the game state loading state. To do that, all we need to do is call the clearAll function, and he will automatically clean up everything that game state loading loaded, but leave everything in memory that is required by the GUI. And then don't forget to reset the button state as well. The last option here that I've added is inside of the pause options screen. You haven't seen this yet, but inside there's going to be a button that allows us to go back to our pause state. So if I go into here, we're talking about the button that allows us to go from the pause options back into the pause state. So in there, whenever that button is pressed, we need to change the game state to be pause and then reset the button itself. So let's go and try this out now. So we're in the main menu, we're going to start a new game, and here we are running around in the game. And once we're done running around, we can press escape, and we're inside of this menu. This is our game state pause state. Now, from here, we can click on the continue button, which puts us back inside of the game. And again, if I press escape, I'm back inside pause. If I hit the options button, then we go inside of the options menu. Now this options menu is specific to the pause state of the game. So you can see in here we can change the viewing depth, we can change the mouse inversion, and we can change the mouse sensitivity. But beyond that, we don't have control over the resolution, and we don't have control over the image quality. The reason why I took these out is because we can't change these dynamically during gameplay. All the textures are already loaded in memory, and if we were to change the image quality now, it would make absolutely no difference because everything's already in memory. We would need to reset all the textures, and that would be sort of an intensive process. So to avoid that, I've removed this option to not allow the user to do that. Same thing with the resolution. You can't change the resolution in mid-game. You can only change it through the main menu, so that's why it's not showing up here. So here's the back button. We've already implemented the functionality here, so if we press on this, we return back to the pause menu. And from the pause menu, we can also go back to the main menu by clicking on exit to main, and here we are back inside of the main menu. So now we have a fully functional navigation system that allows us to go through all these different transitions from any state to any other state that has a line connected to it. But if you've paid close attention to what I've been doing, you should notice that there's a bug in the code. Now let me demonstrate the bug. I'm going to start the game, go under the options menu, and here we can see that viewing depth is set up to be about the middle, mouse sensitivity is about the middle, and mouse inversion is turned on right now. Now if I go and start the game, I can go run around, do whatever I need to do, and I can see my mouse is correctly inverted. I'm going to go into the options menu, hit options, and I'm going to disable mouse inversion. And while I'm here, I might as well change the viewing depth and change the mouse sensitivity as well. Actually, I'll make it a little higher. I'll go back, I'll continue playing. I can see now that my mouse inversion didn't take because it's still inverted. If I press forward, I'm still pitching downward, and if I'm pulling back on the mouse, I'm pitching upward. If I hit the escape key and go into options, I see that this button is unchecked, so I know that that's not working. But look at this as well. If I go back here into the pause menu and exit to the main menu, now look what happens when I go inside of the options. the mouse inversion never took. It's still selected to be checked here, and both the viewing depth and the mouse sensitivity is reset back to the middle. Remember, I changed these slightly when I was inside of the pause menu. Now, the reason why none of this is taking is because as I'm making changes from the pause menu, I'm not carrying them forward to reset the values that are showing up in here, and vice versa. If I were to change this to be unselected inside of the main menu, and let's say I crank these down to be the minimum, start a game. Now, once I'm started here, I'm going to go into the pause menu and go under options. Notice that the near was not set to the minimum, the sensitivity was not set to the minimum. Okay, so let's go and fix all these problems. We'll go back into the main menu. I'm just going to reset this to be 800 by 600 just so it's a lot easier for me to work while I'm recording the videos. First, let's just get our GUI items working, and then we'll get them synchronized between the pause menu and the main menu. The mouse inversion right now is only being set by the options button mouse invert, but we want to add in the case when we're inside of the, but we want to add in the case where we're pressing the pause options button mouse invert as well. So if this button or the main option menu's mouse invert button is pressed, so if either of these are being pressed, then we're going to set the mouse Y accordingly and also set the mouse invert Y value inside of user settings accordingly. So this will make the mouse button invert properly from the pause menu as well as from the main menu options. We can go down here into the slider section, and we can do a similar thing here for the slider depth. If we're in the pause options slider depth slider, then we want to change the viewing depth as well. And down here for the mouse sensitivity, if we're inside of the pause options slide mouse sensitivity, we're going to make it behave the same way as the regular options slide mouse sensitivity. So now this will make all of our GUI controls inside of the pause options menu work correctly. However, we still have a synchronization problem because if we're running something and changing the values inside of the options, like let's say in here, if I change my mouse to be inverted and then go back, start the game, we notice now that my mouse is inverted from here. It's behaving really sluggish because the sensitivity must be low. It is. But notice that here, this didn't get initialized to be inverted. We need to go and synchronize these values with the values from the main menu. If I were to change this to be far and high, and it is inverted, and go back to the main menu and take a look over here, we notice that this didn't get reset, this didn't get reset either. So this is the synchronization problem that we're currently having. The way we synchronize both the main menu's options and the pause menu's options is by using a variable that we already have being controlled by us anytime that the game state is changed. We can go inside of the game OpenGL, where is it? Inside frame. Anytime that the game state changes, that's whenever we need to do a check to see if something has to get synchronized. And we can know when something needs to be synchronized just by looking at this variable here, because we will automatically save this value equal to 0 any time that a state is being transitioned. So using this, we have access to this variable through the scene class here, because we assign the value here inside of the scenes instance of f time change. So inside of the scene, we'll know whenever there's a state transition. Anytime there is a state transition, what we need to do is update all the GUI values. To do that, we can go inside of our scene, and we'll go inside of GUI render. This is the function that gets called anytime we want to render the controls on the screen. But we should check to see if we need to synchronize them before we render them. So here we go. We're going to check to see if this variable is equal to 0. If it is, then we're going to go through all the controls inside of our container. And we're going to be looking for all the controls for the specific game state that we're currently in. And As we're going through them, we're going to go through the switch statements looking for all the different control IDs. If we find that we're working with a radio resolution, then we'll update the radio resolution to be the current value. And we do that by taking a look at the width parameter inside of the user settings. If the resolution width is equal to 1024, then we're going to set the radio button to activate the second button. If it's 1280, then we're going to activate the third button, and if it's 800 or the default, then we're going to activate the first button. If we have the slider depth option being selected for either the pause or the option menu, then we're going to take this controller, P-slider, and we're going to set the value of it to whatever is the current value saved inside P-user settings. Remember, always the current values that the user selected are saved inside P-user settings. So we can always rely on the values that this class is storing. And using these values, we're going to be saving the appropriate values inside of all of our GUI elements. If the quality factor is changed, then we can go and grab the quality factor slider and then set its value according to whatever saved inside of P-user settings. If we have mouse inversion selected, then we're going to get the mouse inversion controller here. We know that it's a button, so we're going to cast this to be GUI button, and then we set the state of it according to whatever's set inside P-user settings. And then the last one here is the mouse sensitivity. We get the mouse sensitivity control through our container, and then we set the value of it according to whatever's saved inside P-user settings. So that's it. Now if we go and run the code, we should see that we now have everything synchronized up properly. If I go in here and let's say I change this down to be down here, this one doesn't matter because it's not in the other control, and let's turn off mouse inversion. We'll start the game, we'll go pause and take a look at the options. Notice that these two are now lined up and this is turned off. I can now crank this up to be the far and high and turn this back on, and then I'll exit back to the main menu and take a look. This is back to far, this is up to high, and mouse inversion is turned on. And just as a sanity check, we can go and run this, make sure that mouse is definitely inverted. I'll pause, go into the options, turn mouse inversion off, go back into the game, and I can see, yep, it's definitely not inverted anymore. So there we go. That's how we get all of our controls from our menu options, from either the pause menu or from the main menu, to be synced up together as well as functioning within our game. So that's basically it. We now have a fully graphical user interface that you can use. You can add in your own controls, make any kinds of items that the user wants to change inside of the options menu, as well as you can tweak other menu options. Maybe you want to have a loading screen or a saving screen. You know how to do that now because everything is grouped underneath these different game states that we created. If you want to create new game states, just go right into this class here, add your own game states, and then handle them accordingly inside of the frame function inside game OpenGL. We do all the loading inside of the scene graph, inside of the scene class, which means that anytime you make sort of decisions over here, you should go and update the show menu, and, well, not really show menu, but rather inside of the GUI render, which is inside of the scene class. So here, this guy will automatically render everything to the screen depending on what is the current game state of the game. Everything is loaded from this one container that holds all of your GUI items. So hopefully by going through these videos you get a clear understanding of how the GUI is working with the game engine, how to integrate everything together, and I've showed you how to incorporate different controls with different functionality within the game. If you have any questions specific to the GUI, go to the website under the forum section, and you'll see that there's a section specific to the GUI elements. If we scroll down here, under number 38 is the GUI and game flow, and number 39 is the GUI menu navigation. So if you have specific questions, just click on these and post them in there, and I'll help you out, or other members that are also following along. If they know the answers, please feel free and answer the questions as you see fit.